get going now. If my fellow panelists will join me on screen, I will ask them to introduce themselves once they are situated appropriately. We're just missing one, and there we go. Very good. Welcome, panelists. I'm going to ask you each to tell us a little bit about yourselves, going alphabetically. We'll start with Mariel.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mariel Giletto. I am a shareholder at Flaster Greenberg. My primary practice is in the corporate and real estate practice groups. I've been practicing law now for about 20 years, and I focus primarily on family-owned and closely held businesses.
Thank you. Rosalind?
Sure. Hello, everyone. This is Rosalind Giovanni. I'm a partner at Forrest Mazars, which is a global accounting firm. My focus is mainly on tax planning for high net worth individuals, families, and closely held business owners. A lot of my work sits at the intersection of family, businesses, and tax planning, helping owners think succession plans, estate planning, income tax compliance, gifting, ownership structure, and lots going on right now is tax impact on a liquidity event when there's an exit or a sale of business.
Very good. Thank you. And Ed?
Hi, everyone. My name's Ed Leach, and I'm a partner and wealth advisor at Highland Financial Advisors. And we are a fee-only, independently owned fiduciary wealth management firm based in Wayne, New Jersey. I specialize in working with business owners and family businesses, helping them align their business, personal, and financial lives. And as a business owner and leader myself in the business, I have the unique opportunity of facing a lot of the same opportunities and challenges that all of you do on this call. So I'm very much looking forward to the discussion.
Very good. And we're actually going to get right into that because I wanted to start, thank you all panelists for joining us. I wanted to start by getting sort of a check on what the situation is now for family businesses, given the economic environment, the business climate. I'm wondering, everybody knows what kind of pressures most businesses are facing: high costs, particularly fuel and energy, the threat of a recession, geopolitical uncertainty, changing consumer tastes. Are family businesses under the same kind of pressure, or are there unique pressures that they're facing now? Ed, I'll start with you since you mentioned some of those opportunities and challenges. What do you see now that most bothers family business owners these days?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. And a lot of the questions that we are getting are usually a symptom of a larger issue centered around either business alignment, personal alignment, or financial alignment. And it's really comes down to aligning a lot of what's going on personally with different opportunities, different things that are thrown at them in terms of managing human capital, different innovations in terms of AI, facing a lot of those similar challenges. But really, when it comes down to it, is we always ask our business owners, what are you trying to achieve? Mm-hmm. And they're usually like, well, there's this opportunity that I have. There's this new initiative. There's this new real estate opportunity. And bringing it back around, and we use this analogy of three legs of a stool, is business, personal, and financial. If you don't have that alignment, if you take one of those legs of the stool away, things fall apart. So a lot of the challenges, again, around things like AI, tax planning, estate, different legislative initiatives, all of those things are impacting family businesses, but most of what we focus on is aligning those three opportunities.
Okay. So there is sort of a different way that family businesses have to approach what most other businesses are facing. Is that right? So that's what I hear you saying. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but.
Yeah, that's right. It's really aligning because most often family businesses specifically have a lot of personal dynamics going on. And usually family goals, family objectives usually fall by the wayside because if you think about a family business owner, they have two huge responsibilities. One, they are the leader of their business. Two, they're responsible for operating their business, knowing whatever type of specialty, craft, whether it be a medical professional, whatever devices or intellectual property they have. And usually by time they satisfy those two things, they have very little time to organize and gather their personal and financial objectives and work with an advisory team, making sure they have the right legal professional, the right tax professionals, guiding them and making sure that each of those three pieces are all aligned.
Okay. Rosalind, I'll bring you in on this too, because I mean, tax rules and laws are always changing. There have been quite significant changes in recent years. Where do you come down on this? Where do you see the particular vulnerabilities or challenges that family businesses in particular are facing right now from your perspective?
So I would say more than challenges, there are more opportunities than challenges currently. Yes, challenges exist every time, and I think it's how the family are looking towards even being like bonus depreciation. How can you take those tax law changes and help your business? That being said, because the valuation of the businesses are so high, it's a perfect timing to think about, you know, gifting and have if it's a family-owned business, you want to make sure that you get some kind of discounting from that and try to pass the generational wealth to next generation. Now that our state planning exemption is 15 million per individual, I think it's a great time to not the best time to move as a valuation, but we know that the valuations are now going to reduce. So maybe going with the wind and saying that how can we try to do a state planning by transferring your assets or your business to the next generation. And then with that also comes up with a lot of tax planning that can be done. And I'm sure Mariel can vouch to that there is in terms of gifting and making sure that different kind of trust mechanism you can use in order to move the generational wealth. Especially right now, if you think that you're starting a startup and your business is going to really trifold in the next couple of years, this is the best time to kind of do that with what's available out there in terms of state planning. Along with that, there's a lot of income tax planning comes as well, with getting the right structure placed from get-go, not waiting after the fact, is one of the many key compliance that we make sure that our clients have in place before even the next generation takes it.
Okay, well, you touched on a lot of things that we'll get to in more depth as we go along, I'm sure. But I wanted to get Mariel's view on the status of family businesses. What are you hearing most often in your practice when you talk to folks? What are they concerned about these days?
Thank you, Jeff. So the most common question that I'm getting, well, there's two very common questions. I'm not going to jump, but AI is always a common question, so we're not allowed to jump yet. But the second most common question is succession planning. Piggybacking off of what my prior two panelists have suggested. And I think one of the unique challenges for family-owned businesses these days is baked into the fact that society and business is moving at such a quick pace now, that family-owned businesses are, I wouldn't say struggling to keep up, but are feeling the pressures of such quick changes.
Okay.
And in regard to the succession planning, what I hear most often is that grandfather or grandmother did it this way, and so father is going to do it this way, and then the next generation says, wait a minute, we're going to do it this way. And that way is so foreign to the second gen, because the time between the first gen and the second gen, usually or if you look historically, there weren't so many changes. But between second and third gen, or third and fourth now, that pace, that those changes are so dramatic and so drastic that it's hard for those two generations to communicate with each other. And the other thing that I'm seeing is that middle gen, that sandwich gen, is staying in the business longer.
Oh, okay.
And for that, because people are living longer and they're able to work longer, and technology is allowing them to stay in. That creates more of a struggle between second and current generation, given the aging of the population and the fact that, dad, mom, they're saying, look, I can do this. But kids are saying, wait a minute, I'm going to move this business this way. Can you please allow me to do that? So I'm seeing that constant push and pull from both directions, and I see both sides of it. That is something that is unique to family-owned businesses in this constantly changing and evolving business environment at such a quick pace.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I was thinking as I was thinking about this discussion and how to start with it, I thought that given the structure of family businesses, the way that the very nature of family businesses, that they could be either more nimble because perhaps they're smaller and with a less hierarchical
bureaucracy
structure. Pardon?
Bureaucracy.
Bureaucracy, right, right. Or that, as you just mentioned, the difference in generations, the differences in approaches may make it a little bit more difficult for them to move on. So I think you've all touched on that nicely. I wanted to get back to Ed, though, on this question, because I don't want to leave this on a totally down note. But you mentioned opportunities. Where are the biggest opportunities do you see right now for family businesses? What's out there that they should be taking advantage of that you can see right now? I mean, from your perspective as a financial planner.
Yeah, and it's really piggybacking off what Mariel shared and Rosalind shared about multi-generational planning is there is such an availability of information and technology accessible to help scale businesses and keep things within the family. And the opportunity lies in, we have a term, and it's we use an entrepreneurial operating system called EOS, and how we run our business and how we help our clients run their businesses. But one of the terms that they use in is called delegate and elevate. And delegate and elevate is essentially the opportunity for the prior generations to delegate a lot of their day-to-day responsibilities and train that next generation and get them involved as early on as possible. But don't wait for the point for which that generation wants to exit the business, because at that point it's too late. If you have a really well-trained next generation, and maybe they're not in a leadership position yet, but you are delegating those responsibilities to them, communicating them, involving them in the decision process, you are actually building a more valuable business, because someone or somewhere that valuation is going to go up because it's just a really well-run business.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what might be one of the greatest challenges for family businesses is dealing with those multi-generational dynamics, but it's also the greatest opportunity for potential valuation growth in the future as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a theme that we're going to come back to over and over again is how the interplay between generations. But I want to get Rosalind into this because you also mentioned some of the changes. I'm curious, are there, from your perspective, what are the best opportunities from a tax perspective right now, or what are the missed opportunities? What are businesses missing at this point, family businesses?
Sure. Just even before that, I think Ed brought up a very good point. The family governance becomes very important as well. And we do that with a lot of our clients. We sit with their next generational even when they are like in college and kind of understand what their thought process is, and see if they are interested. And if not, we've helped family create foundations where they can be some significant portion of decision making is given to them so they can feel part of the next generation, and then giving them an equity portion as well, very small, doesn't have to be the ownership, so they can understand the actual businesses. So the structure, I come back to the structure, is very important when you set it up. You don't have to give the ownership to next generation until they're ready, but there can be certain types of benefits or anything that can promote the next generation to help. I think we have done in last 2 years, I would say more. Although the next generation understands the importance of AI, they also understands the importance of bricks and mortars, right? So it's like if you have a real business, they can take it to next level and help the family. So I think Ed point got a very good question. In terms of tax planning, what we've seen is clients they don't start planning ahead. Their planning, their tax compliance planning or the state planning comes in way after, when they think, oh, I think the business is really valuable. Not at the start point where they think, yes, I have a great business, but it's not going to do as great. But now because of the valuation, they're doing really well. The missed opportunity from then to now could be income tax as well as state tax, as I mentioned before. Income tax could be if there was a possibility to sell a part of the business to even private equity, there could be a place where they could have had a possibility of exempting the entire gain. We call it 1202 or QSBS, if it was structured in a way or properly. If they've everything structure is done, they're a partnership instead of a C Corp, there's a missed opportunity. There's a huge missed opportunity there. So it really, and it's not one size fit all, right? You cannot just put a plan for everybody to go. Every family is different, and if they're thinking of keeping that business in the family or really selling it also is a key important part. And estate planning, I think Mariel touched it and I touched it as well before, that starting when the valuation is lower is the best
Okay.
strategy, because then the appreciation is out of the state. You're not paying government after yourself when you pass away 50% of your asset to the government. You're actually preserving that for next 5, 6 generation ahead.
Okay. Mariel, you were nodding, so I wanted to get your view on that question too, about opportunities available now that you see.
Yeah, I first agree with everything that my colleagues have said. So being the third makes me at a disadvantage here.
We'll
You're
change
taking
that, don't
words
worry.
out of my mouth, so that I'm just going to say yes. Opportunity. No, what I think from my perspective is that I think in this AI technology, fast-paced environment where we're losing those relationships, and we have this feeling among the country and our citizens that there's this loneliness. I think that family-owned businesses are uniquely positioned to build trust because of the relationships that they have built throughout the longevity of the family-owned business, right? And I think there's a longing for customers to get back to that feeling of a family that they can trust, right? So Rosalind touched on it, that they can be in the brick and mortar and they have a touch and feel, and they can communicate with customers on a different level than just through the internet. While they also are in a position to embrace the new technologies and use those technologies to their advantage. So I think that family-owned businesses, again, have so much opportunity. It's just a matter of, are they able to take and grasp that opportunity and use it to their advantage? The other thing that to consider is that as a distinction between a publicly traded company, they don't have to focus on quarterly results, right? They can look at the long picture. And most of my family-owned businesses have been in this for 2, 3, 4 generations. And so, they can weather through this recession or this next downturn of the economy or whatever geopolitical issues are transpiring. Now, it doesn't mean that the founder and CEO isn't going crazy and calling the attorney every 5 seconds because they're so nervous about the world crashing, but we don't have to show that to the public. So that's why when you get your trusted advisors, those are the people that you need to rely on. You can show your weaknesses to those trusted advisors while turning to the outside public facing and showing this strong facade or the strong business, and really branding to people that are craving that connection now.
Okay. You mentioned that most of your clients were three or four generation family businesses. I wanted to, before we move on to technology, I wanted to get your views on this, though. I don't want to leave aside a whole cohort of folks who I think have started family businesses recently, especially after the pandemic. A husband and wife who now are home together and decide that they want to start a business, or siblings get together and there's not 3 or 4 generations. They're the first ones. Mariel, since you brought it up, I mean, first of all, do you have any experience in that regard? And second, does that change the calculus or the sort of outlook or approach that you would tell these folks to take?
Well, I grew up in a family-owned business, so yes, I have experience, and it was my mom and dad. So, husband and wife starting a business is a specifically unique situation. And yes, I do have clients that have that type of business. I think, again, going to my longevity discussion, family-owned businesses and working with your spouse and working your family is a challenge. It is really hard, right? So when you add that dynamic, and if you're able to get through that hard, you can face the other hards that go with building a business and growing a brand, right? So you are, with adversity comes growth and strength. And I think that because of the unique interpersonal relationships that family-owned businesses also have to deal with, if you can weather that, you can be in there for the long haul. Now, 3rd and 4th generation family-owned businesses are unicorns. I do agree, because of the opportunity to exit and the fact that the next gen often leaves pretty quickly. I left, right? I know I say this all the time. I was a family-owned business survivor, but there are those that last, and those that last have proven that they can deal with adversity and challenges.
Okay. Do you have the same kind of experience with relatively new family-owned businesses? And if so, how does it change the way you deal with them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, sorry. I thought she was asking me. I'm like, I thought I already answered that question.
Yes, you did. You went first this time. See?
Yeah. So, for us, regardless of whatever stage, we always start out and ask the question, why? Why are you doing this? Why is this important to you? Why is this business matter? How does it impact you both personally and financially? And in working with a couple, specifically, let's say husband and wife, use that example in starting a business is, there's two of our most precious resources is time and money, right? And both of those, every decision we make in life is a trade-off between one of those two things. So starting a family business, specifically, one with your spouse, and especially if it's new, is going to come under a lot of stress. It's going to be a trade-off of time, but also might be a trade-off of money. Maybe they're leaving to lucrative careers to be more entrepreneurial and start their own business. So dealing with the personal side, we call it, of the balance sheet and getting all of that in order and creating alignment will often allow and create a de-stressor when it comes to them actually running their business. And the two most important things, again, is really aligning and creating process of how you make decisions. What is the sandbox? What is the framework? And we always start with, what are your trusted advisors? It sounds very, there's three of us on this call and, self-promoting, but the importance of having the right team in place to give you guidance in all the different areas of tax, legal, someone quarterbacking the entire situation is so valuable to have that sounding board, because you're also getting the collective experience of all the different multi-generational families that have come before you in those family businesses.
Okay. And Rosalind, I'm guessing that there have to be some sort of different kinds of tax implications for a relatively new family-owned business as opposed to one that's existed for generations.
Actually, that's more even if the newer kids on block, right? They're starting startups and really having an amazing legacy for next generation. But right now their focus is, okay, I built this app. I'll give you an example. I have a client who built a gaming app and sold it for millions within 3-year period, 4-year period. And it's a cultural shock for themselves, people around them. And how do you not first of all make sure that you and he was brilliant and he did things right. He's a Stanford graduate. I guess they have some more of understanding what they need to do, but that he had structured it correctly all by himself. And then he came to us and he did miss some opportunity. He thought that, oh, I have helped, AI has helped me. I've done, he's in AI field and he did everything by himself, but there were a lot of missed opportunity, a lot of gaps that he didn't fill. He fell short and he had to pay a huge long-term capital gain tax where he could have avoided that. So even a new husband and wife or just a solo person starting anything new, I would say, as Ed mentioned, you need to have a team. You cannot do it yourself. You'll need advisors, you need attorneys, you need accountant, and they're talking to each other. It's very important. I think especially in small family business, the cash flow is hard. And at that moment in time, they feel that let us do all the work, and when the time comes, we'll get the advisors. And I think that's also a very big mistake, and finding the right people from onset and making that investment in your own business. It is an investment, and where how do you structure it, where you're putting your monies, return of investment, legacy planning, estate planning, everything starts with the onset. As I said, sooner the better. That's always been my case.
All right, very good. All right, well, a couple of you have mentioned AI, and so I wanted to get to that because that strikes me as something that could be a generational issue as well, although perhaps not. And Mariel, I want to start with you because you were the one who said, I think, that one of the two most common questions you get is about AI. So what is the question you get about AI, number one, and what is the answer you give?
How do I use it?
Okay.
How can I use it? Right. And I think that oftentimes what I get the most, right? I get somebody that gives me a document that they think that they can use, that they generated through AI, and then, or they give me an email that I know that was written. They give me an analysis, and immediately I think, oh, please, I hope that you guys didn't use a public facing AI system, right? Because from a legal perspective, from a counsel's perspective, my first core instinct is to protect the trade secrets and the confidential information. Right. I've had so many clients that said, I've run this through ChatGPT or I run this through Claude, and they gave me this document or they gave me this analysis. And for me, that is the first place I start, where I say, look, I know that you want to use this, and I know that you should use it intelligently, but once you run a document or you run any information through an open source AI model, you're losing any confidentiality or trade secret protections that you may have. One of the things that people don't really realize is that if there's a non-disclosure agreement in place or there's other confidentiality obligations, once you put any information related to that NDA or that confidentiality through AI, you've already breached that NDA, right? And so now not only have you shared information, but you're subject to liability from the other party to that agreement. So that is an issue. The other issue is, with your intellectual property, your trademarks, and your trade secrets, sharing them with the public devalues that asset, right? That's something that you've built up over generations or over a couple of months or years or whatever. And now you're sharing it in public forum. If you then go to protect that asset, if we go through litigation, they discover that you shared it through an open source AI, you're going to dilute some of those protections. I've also seen people ask about employment and hiring and using AI to evaluate resumes. Again, you're subjecting yourself to risk through litigation for running these resumes or any profiles through AI and potentially, discrimination lawsuits. Also, if you have public or personal information that you collect as part of your business and you're running that through AI, that could be a violation of laws and consumer protection laws and consumer safety laws. So what I think is happening is that people, unbeknownst to them are using this because they want to use it because it's helpful. And so the conversation usually starts when they're sharing a document with me. And that's where I approach it to say, how can we do this so that you can get the benefit of AI without, the negative consequences of destroying some of these assets that you've build up. And that's a really hard question because a lot of these new entrepreneur closed loop AI LLMs cost a lot of money. So we have to really weigh the use of, for instance, let's talk about Copilot. Copilot, if you don't have the entrepreneur, I think it's an enterprise system. It is an open AI, open source AI. So, then paying for the next level may be something that people don't want to do. So it's evaluating the risk of using the open source versus the reward of paying for the closed source. And that's a really deep and a little bit of a time-consuming conversation so that we can really properly see where the business is positioned and how much they can afford and how much they want to protect.
Yeah. Now, when you say running it through AI, what it sounds like you're saying most folks are using things like ChatGPT and Claude as opposed to, say, data analysis or chatbots or things like that. Is that what you're seeing?
Sometimes, but yeah, they also are using Copilot. And I think that's where the sneaky, unsuspecting, if you don't have that enterprise model and you're using Copilot to, review your email or, Copilot tells me all the time, I can triage your inbox for you.
Right. I hate
Well, now
that.
you've just exposed your entire inbox to open source for Microsoft to use as they would like and to share with whomever. And so it's those unsuspecting everyday, oh, there's just a new update. And it's so quick and so innocent. And I can't fault people for using it because it's been made available to you.
Right.
It's just, I think in this day and age, it's let's pause and take a look at what I'm actually using and how the other side is using my information. What is Microsoft doing with that information that I'm providing to them? And truthfully, and I do feel for business owners, this interrupts the flow of your business, right? Because you're not focused on how is Microsoft using my information. What are you focused on? How am I going to build and grow my business? How am I retaining customers? How am I going to fund the next growth cycle? Whatever it is that you're thinking about. And so, outsourcing these thoughts to me may be the best way to do it, right? And that's where having trusted advisors, again, is going to help you because if you're so focused, like you should be, on growing your business, You don't want to take the time to think about what Microsoft is doing with that information, and paying someone to help you think through that could be a really good use of your money, rather than now defending a lawsuit about somebody that's using your trade secrets without your permission.
Right. Okay, Ed, you're nodding along there. It must be tempting for a lot of people to say, "Here, Claude, here's all my financial information. Come up with a plan for me." Have you seen that at all, or what's been your experience?
Yeah, and it's funny, we're almost operating in a way where most of a lot of the recommendations or things that we're talking about, we almost know in anticipations clients might be taking it, especially our younger generation clients, and running it through AI and saying, "Hey, this is what my wealth manager told me. What do you think?" And one of the first things we do around education is exactly what Mariel said. It's about privacy. It's the most important thing about knowing what you're uploading. So I'll give you a great example. We implemented AI in our business, and how we're using it is we started off with a process of almost who are we trying to hire, or what are we trying to make efficient? And the reason for that was because one, AI exists. It could be on any one of your team members or employees' desktops. And it doesn't mean that, oh, if we don't use AI, that someone in your business isn't using it. So we looked at it was we wanted to create policy around it and create governance around it to say, here is how we use it. Here's why we use it, and make sure we have compliance and legal counsel to advise us as a business the right way that we are using it. Obviously, we have very sensitive information. So again, all it takes is one misstep and we could expose clients' personal identifying information and creating potential a lot of issues. So we looked at it from a standpoint of here's how we're going to use it. Here's our objective. We ran that by our compliance and legal counsel. We created a document. We're going through a training process actually this quarter to do a firm-wide rollout and say, if you need to use AI, here are our use cases. Here's why you use it. And here's our compliance backup of how we're monitoring it and creating some just compliance around it to make sure it's not used irresponsibly.
Okay. And Rosaline, again, the tax code is dense. It's a lot of information there. Again, are you seeing folks, saying, "Claude, save me some money on taxes here"?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very, very common. I've had a client who put his return in Copilot, I believe, and asked if to find what they missed opportunities, and thank God there was not many that made any sense, but he came up with bizarre items that were like, okay, this doesn't make sense. They've also like put your returns, like how much this should cost us to do the tax returns. And they come up with a ridiculous low amount, and not realizing that a lot of work needs to be, human cannot be completely replaced, right? Human, you need human, and I think AI doesn't realize that we need human. But I guess humans should know that humans are needed.
Yes.
Just recently, I had a small business owner very worried that how can he use AI? Like, on the other hand, like he wants to use AI, but he doesn't, and he feels that he's behind and he hasn't used the technology to bring his talents. But at the same time, he doesn't want to fire his people who are doing the legwork, which was great. But we've started empowering our clients by saying that AI won't replace family businesses, or AI won't replace people. What AI is going to do is it can be used to effectively save management time. Some kind of behind the desk, people are expected to be more advisory, and that way the new kids on the block have to kind of prepare themselves to more advisory role rather than just feeding it. So data information can be done by AI, but they're not replacing human being or businesses in any sort of manner, at least for next, I would say at least one generation, maybe then.
Okay. All right. So, Mariel, the question is, how do we use it? Where should a family business start? I mean, what I'm hearing from all of you is that the free stuff is probably not a good idea, but there are lots of costs involved with the non-free stuff. But how do you begin to design that? I'm guessing the answer is going to be you're going to have to talk to experts, people like you, perhaps a cybersecurity expert. Where do you tell them to start? Is it with find someone who you trust who can guide you in this? Is that really what it comes down to?
I think that's second. I think first,
Okay.
I think you have to evaluate what your actual needs are.
Okay.
right? So if you know the needs of an HVAC parts manufacturer may not be for AI may not be the same as the needs for a software development company, right?
Fair enough.
So analyzing internally what your needs are with respect to AI and what tasks you want to automate. I think that's your first step. And then the next step, or simultaneously, is talking to someone, your trusted advisor, which may, you know, your lawyer, may be a financial advisor if you are looking at financial statements, if that's one of your needs. And also, truthfully, you know, talking to your insurance broker about what cybersecurity insurance you may have, because one of the other issues that you risk is once you share that information with the World Wide Web, does that expose your company to potential predators, that cyber predators,
Right.
right? Because you've just shared information. So I think first you need to analyze what it is you need, what type of AI you need, what automations you need, and then second is, you know, talking to a trusted advisor about policies and training that you could implement at your organization to make sure that AI is used intelligently, and in the best interest of the organization.
Okay. And from your perspective, are most of these, or I don't say most of these businesses, most of the businesses you deal with, are they set up to be able to handle this? Or do they have the finances? Are they capable of sort of finding the kinds of people and making the kinds of decisions that Mariel is talking to, or do they need your guidance, for example, in trying to figure out where it is they go with this?
Yeah, it's really, again, you know, we always encourage clients, bring everything to us, use us as a sounding board, because, you know, we ask a lot of questions. We run our business ourselves. We work with a lot of professionals that also run their own businesses, and we're always talking about AI, how to create efficiencies. And again, security is the most important thing. I think, again, this goes back to a little bit of that multi-generational planning or doing a lot of delegation is oftentimes maybe the owner is not the best person to be evaluating AI. It's finding a champion within your business who is the most maybe technologically sound, who maybe does have the time in their day, while the owner's running the business, to step aside, do due diligence, and evaluate exactly what Mariel said: is what are their needs? What are they trying to accomplish? Is AI even appropriate for our business? Because that cost benefit analysis can't be done until you figure out why we're even using AI, or what specific task is it going to manage. So, for example, you know, an HVAC company may be using it for sales leads or service leads or setting up calendaring appointments. Very different than maybe way a medical practice would use it, very different from way maybe a law firm would use it. So it's identifying the exact need, and then using, again, depending on whatever regulatory bodies you have, legal counsel, one, especially from a compliance standpoint, to say, okay, what if I do this and we do have a breach? Again, I think Mariel brought up a great point that is often overlooked: is speak to your insurance broker. Do you even have cybersecurity insurance? Are you even appropriately covered? And again, looking at it, everything through the lens of risk, not so much opportunity. And that's how I think AI, you know, in the due diligence should be structured: is, okay, what is the opportunity? What are you trying to accomplish? But looking at it through the lens purely from a risk management standpoint is really one of the most important things.
Okay. Rosalind, do you get those same kinds of questions, and how do you handle them, and what do you tell folks? Where should they start?
So now I'm the last one, so I'm going to say exactly what
Everybody's going to be last at some point.
Yeah,
There's
no,
nothing
no,
to
I'm
do.
just kidding. No, no, but exactly. I don't think I need to repeat everything, but exactly what Mariel and Ed mentioned. It is a similar concept. Some clients have been ahead in the game. Some clients are not as ahead, and both have some kind of concerns. And we do have, like, our industry itself has really invested heavily on AI now. Security has been taken care of, data privacy is taken care of, and everything that we've shared so far is a big concern, at the same as an opportunity. So you really have to work this towards your benefit and how to use it. You can't say, I'm not going to use it because I have issues with data privacy. You just have to find the right avenue to use it.
No. All right. So then let's talk a little bit about what happens next, and that is, and Ed, you mentioned this tension between, you know, who should be the one to do this. Is it the owner who may have been the founder, you know, many years ago, or is it somebody who may be more tech savvy, whatever that means. And that brings up a whole, and it's not just technology I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about, how do you bring about change in the business? What kind of discussions should family-owned businesses have about what the future looks like? Where do we grow this business? How do we protect the legacy of the founder and his or her immediate family with the generations that have come later? Do you find that you're having those kinds of discussions? It can be about technology, or it can just be about starting up something new. So let's try this new thing. In the way of running the business. How do you resolve those tensions, and what do you tell people how do you tell people to sort of approach those conversations?
Sure, yeah, and I'll use the example around delegation and reducing ownership dependence. So the founder dependence, or whatever the key leadership generation is, wherever that stage is. It could be first generation, it could be third or fourth generation. Is recentering around, why does this business exist? What is your long-term objective? Most oftentimes say, well, I want to create value. I want to grow my business. And creating value in a business is actually one of the key components of that from our perspective, is reducing owner dependence. It's creating documented systems, creating continuity and succession within the company. Because again, we always ask this question is, would you buy your own business the way that it stands right now?
Okay.
Right. And let's go through that exercise. Let's actually step outside your business, and we go through a list of questions, and we start to ask them and do due diligence on your own business. Find the holes. And oftentimes it's around, I, the founder, or I, that primary generation, I do everything. I do all of the sales. I need to be there. I need to be present to do this. And they're being pulled in so many directions. So we try to say and align again, by you creating and planning in advance and delegating responsibilities and elevating those around you, is actually, without doing much legwork other than just giving up maybe a little bit of control, is adding so much value to their business. And it's going to create a more well-run business, and hopefully create a lot more time for the owner as well.
Okay. Rosaline, how do you advise folks who come to you with that question? We want to try something different. We want to set up a new venture, or some part of the family wants to set up a new venture. Maybe not the founder, maybe not the patriarch or the matriarch, but some of the later generations. What advice do you give them about how to do that, and what kind of discussions you need to have?
Sure. As you know, the question is, what's the plan? What's the plan 5 years, 10 years down the road? I think that's the main question you start with. And the plan is, okay, I'm going to get this business started and sell it within 5 years. There's a different planning for that. If there is this saying, okay, I'm going to create something and I think it's going to give me passive income after 5 years, and I don't want to do this anymore, but I will have this cash flow, and that's why I'm looking to do it. That has a different planning structure. So really finding the right structure for yourself and your plan is the key to going forward, so that you're not invited with an unintended tax consequences or any kind of, and then making sure of giving ownership. Who owns it? Ownership and management could be completely different. You can be an owner, you don't have to be a manager, and there's a tax consequences when that happens, like if the income is passive or active. So it is, and if you're planning to, there are ways to shield losses. Like you're going to create something. I have a client who has a huge income next year. He's planning to buy a car wash this year so that he could take the bonus depreciation, which is he's getting over, I think, 200 million W-2. He's buying $100 million property. He was going to buy it in 27 the same year. I was like, no, you have to buy it now, because there's a tax consequences going forward in next year, because in the year you buy it, you can only take 600,000 losses, 461L limitation. I'm going more technical terms. But if you didn't talk to your accountants, you would buy the property next year thinking you'll get the deduction for deduction, but no, you wasted the whole thing and everything gets forward to 28. So making sure what your planning is, what is your reasoning? This client wants a loss. He really thinks in the future he can turn it around and resell it and figure it out, but he doesn't want to pay taxes next year. So he's like, okay, I'm going to buy this property. And then he's also buying some real estate and making his wife a real estate professional. So there is a lot of things that can be done. Talking to your, and that's why one of the key important fact for our business is we are in touch with our clients every quarter. That's usually tax accountants are like, okay, you prepare the tax returns and you move on. That's not the right way. Those are just preparers. The advisors are, you meet them, you talk to them, you pick up the call as driving and say, hey, what's going on? Is something in hopper? And talk to them. I think that's the key.
Okay. And Mariel, have you run across this at all in your practice? And if so, what do you advise folks to do? How do you advise people to approach? You know, we want to try something new, as we want to set up something else. But on the other hand, we do have this long-standing business that has a lot of goodwill in the community and among our vendors and our clients and customers. But we also want to diversify revenue streams. Is that sort of a common flashpoint that you see, or is it just something that comes as a matter of business course?
I see it all the time. And one of the questions we ask is, who has that goodwill, right? Who owns that goodwill? Because sometimes the owners themselves have the goodwill and it's not housed in the business, right? It's kind of, as a family-owned business, it's kind of commingled. But what we want to do is we want, from a legal perspective, is to separate any potential liability or exposure. So one of the first things that I would counsel a client on is, if you have this core business that has a lot of assets or has any assets, and you're starting a new venture that may or may not be risky, let's put that into another entity, right? Let's structure it so that the other entity can contain any liability. And we want to protect against what, I don't know if anybody's heard this term, but we use it all the time, piercing the corporate veil, so that we separate the assets of this new venture and the liabilities into this one entity. And when we try to operate that as separate as possible, so that a plaintiff, a creditor, doesn't pierce the veil of this corporation and get the assets of the core business. That is a unique and, for some family-owned businesses, a real struggle. Because they're so used to running everything through the one business, and then having a separate new business or multiple lines of businesses really make it a little bit cumbersome or a little bit overwhelming for them to think about. So that's where I try to make, well, let me put it this way. You need to find advisors who will help you through that process, because it's not just the process of setting up the new LLC or setting up the new corporation, because that can be done. The next part is, well, how do I actually do this? Right? Like, make this easier for me. Again, because your primary focus is building your business. My primary focus is protecting you from risk or advising you of the risks. And so that I think one of the issues that family-owned businesses and businesses in general struggle with is that as you grow, your problems become different. And sometimes those can seem overwhelming. And I think one of the questions that we had asked in this preparation is, when do you start fielding out to advisors? When do you start looking to people for these type of solutions? And I think that's a unique question for each family-owned business to evaluate on their own time. But yes, if there's a new venture, to get back to your question, I have a couple clients that have, 15, 20, 30 LLCs. And that's because we want to separate the liabilities from the assets so that we don't destroy the entirety of the legacy that we've built.
Okay, so it's more complicated than just letting Junior go off and do whatever he or she wants.
No. And sometimes, truthfully, the founder, the patriarch, the matriarch, doesn't want Junior to do it.
Right, exactly. That's what I was getting.
I often get
Junior
a lot of, okay, let's bring him in. Let's rein him in. We're not going to give him any money until he's 35 or 25, or, it depends. And all these things are so family specific. They're so individualistic. They're so, is this person responsible? Do they know what they're doing? Are they willing to take the risk? These are just, there's not a one size fits all solution. And again, when we go back to your question of how are family owned businesses unique to take advantage of these opportunities, again, without the bureaucracy of a publicly traded company or corporations, you have a little bit more flexibility to explore these individualistic issues.
Okay. All right. We're going to get to another process, succession and exit planning. But before we do, I want to remind our viewers and let those know who joined late that we are going to leave time for questions at or a little past the top of the hour. Again, if you want to ask a question of our experts, please use the Q&A button in the Zoom control bar. Ask your questions there, and we'll get to as many as we can. Okay, I think what we've heard in our coverage of family businesses, what we hear a lot is one of the most important questions these types of entities face is succession planning and exit planning. And Ed, I want to start with you on the question first of succession planning. That's got to be a fraught discussion, I'm sure. Where do you start with that? When someone comes to you and says, "Okay, this business has been in my family for decades, but it's time now for me to step aside and to have somebody else take over." What's the first question you ask? Who is going to take over? I mean, where do you start?
The first question we actually start with is, are you personally ready? And what are you going to be doing once you give up that role? Most oftentimes, the greatest conflict in that transition, succession, exit, whatever it might be, is the owner or founder or that generation actually ready to give up that control? And what are they going to do with their time? And that's where that example that I gave earlier, those three legs of the stool around business, which is really the exit part of it, but the personal and financial readiness is the family financially prepared for an exit, whether that be to a third party, a liquidation event, to a next generation, whatever it may be. But are they personally ready? Are their goals identified and whatnot? Because most times succession or exit failures are going to originate not with a valuation issue, not with a financial issue. It's usually around the owner or founder of that controlling generation getting cold feet right before they have to sign on the dotted line and give up control. So we actually start with, why are you doing this? What are you going to be doing with your time? What is motivating this at this point in time for you? And that's where exit or succession planning for us starts with owners before they're even thinking about exiting. Because again, if you're already always in a constant state of readiness to exit, you've run a really good business, you've got documented processes, you've thought about customer concentration, revenue streams, cash flow, you have your operating agreements in order, you probably have a really good legal and tax team, you have your business in great shape, you're prepared to exit, because sometimes exit or succession doesn't actually come by choice. It could be death, it could be disability, and these are usually families' greatest assets on their balance sheet. And planning for those, unwanted or, untimely exits or forced exits is one of the most important things you could do from a personal and financial readiness standpoint. So the first question, I guess, to get back to the original is just as, why are you doing this? And more importantly, what are your plans for post-transition?
Okay. Well, Mariel, where do you start?
I think I start with the same way that Ed does. Because the person that comes in is the person that has the assets, right? And I go back to that, what I'm getting more and more often is that business owners are staying in the business longer. And I think for them, it's a really hard decision to make. And that question that Ed asked, what are you going to do? I don't know that the new owner, the exiting owner has that answer. Ready. Sometimes they do, and that makes my job a lot easier because they're willing to and ready to change. But from a legal perspective, after we get through all the emotional stuff, I think I want to talk about tax planning. I want to talk about who the next owner is. I want to talk about how we're going to pay for this transition. What is the value of the asset that you're transferring to the person that's buying it? Can they pay for it? Are they getting financing to buy you out? Are you gifting it? We talk about your estate plan in connection with your business succession plan. And we talk about, again, that second part, what are you going to do if it is a sale rather than a gift? What are you going to do with that asset after you receive it, that cash in exchange for the value of the business? So there's a lot of legal questions that come into play that we sit down with the business owners. And again, the estate, the tax, and the business are all intertwined into one discussion. I think that tri-party discussion is more than some of the exiting generation anticipated sometimes.
Okay.
So that type of approach, while thorough, sometimes shocks people because they think, oh, I'm just going to give it to my daughter, or I'm just going to give it to my son. But if it was just that easy, then we wouldn't have the IRS and other parties that would be saying that it was harder. So yes, it's not as easy as I'm just giving it to someone else.
Right. Okay. So, Rosaline, there's got to be a lot of tax implications here. Where do you start, and what do you to Mario's point? What's the biggest mistake people make when they start going down this road?
I think great that Ed's asking if you're ready. Our usual question is, are your books ready?
Okay.
Are your books ready? Have you had the financials that you would need to show what the valuation is? Because most of the firm things that, oh, they're going to sell EBITDA times 5, 10. And because in their mind, they're making a lot of money, could that be cash money but when you sell your business, everything goes to a transition from most of the time from cash to accrual, and you might lose a lot of income that you thought was income. It was just cash flow. So we really have to sit down with them and saying, is your business ready? Do you have your books ready? Do you have the technology implemented? And I think that is a hard question. And when you say you're ready, it takes at least 2 more years after that
Okay.
for you to go to the market and say, hey, I'm ready with my books and records and technology and everything. I'm here. Who wants to buy? Right? If you do go to the market without that, you will be probably shortchanged. You won't get the money and this is very particular. My dad went through this process, and we saw the difference between what he got after the books were ready compared to what he was getting nothing. And by the time the books were ready, and it's not that the books were fragmented, we just had good books and records, we had technology in place and everything, and it was trifold. So really you need to make sure you're busy. Yes, this is and a lot of large accounting firms help you that we have M&A guys that go through your books and see what needs to be done and changed in next 2-3 years. Sometimes it's a 3 or 4 year plan, 5 year plan that, hey, let's implement this next year so that your balance sheet is stronger, so the income statement is stronger. So I think that's the key. Then, of course, with that comes tax planning. If you're thinking 5 years down the road, how do you want to sell it? Who are you wanting to sell it? Do you want to keep some portion of it for your next generation? Do a rollover? Are you selling it to private equity, or are you selling to and what are you selling? If you're selling to private equity, it's completely different than if you're selling to a third party. Your involvement, you want to stay in the business, and all. It's a host of questions. But I would take away from this is give yourself 4 to 5 years prior to the sale, and ask yourself a question. Okay, I think I want to retire. My next generation does not want to take it. Are my books ready for 5 years later?
Okay.
And start the process.
Okay, yeah, and is that process disruptive? I'm just wondering, if you take that long, how do you balance between making those kinds of plans and doing those kinds of things with just keeping the business running? I mean, you got to keep the business running, right? I mean, you got to keep it, you got to keep moving, you got to keep the books right up to date, you got to make profits, you got to do all that.
It could be disruptive if you haven't done the right things,
Okay.
right? Hoping most of the steps are done correctly. And the 5 years is to just improve your business, books and records and technology, so you can sell it for more. So businesses as usual, you're adding bit more of work. Our advisors who will help you provide that service. It's not that you don't have to do it all yourself, but yes, it could be disruptive if your books are completely massive, like, oh gosh, we need to recreate everything. Then of course, then that's a different situation.
Okay. Okay. Well, you brought us into the question of exit planning and planning for a sale. So let's start with that. And since you brought it up, I'll start with you about when do you know that your business is ready to sell? I mean, what are the signs? What should folks be looking for? That, okay, I'm ready to leave. The next generation doesn't want it. I'm going to sell it. How do you look at your business and decide, yes, okay, it is ready now. Now is the time.
now is never the time, right? Because you always feel you might hold on, get more, or but when you really know that your next generation does not want to take it and you want to retire with certain amount of money and at certain time, you'd really have to back trace that and say, okay, I need to start an exit strategy plan.
Mhm.
And then at that moment, brainstorming is first thing. You brainstorm with your attorneys, you brainstorm with your advisors and see what are you thinking. We have gone ahead and done a market evaluation for that business if it's in the current situation and see what they're getting and if they're okay with it and they would really like, I'm done. I just want to get out of here. I don't care about getting a little less. Um, and if there's a buyer for it, and if that's the thought process, we entertain that thought process. Like you don't have to stick around if you want to just you're done with it. But if you have that time and you know that you want to retire in 5 years, that's when you know that this is the exit plan. This is what money I want to come out of it post taxes, because tax is a big part of it. And because sometimes you say, oh, I want to sell it for 15 million and you're giving the government at least 6-7 million, and you're like, this is not what I expected, right? So I think understanding what net, the cost of being in the business for the next couple of years, and also what do you want to walk out, and of course plan with the advisors what are you going to do with that money is also important. Sometimes inflation is just that you're going to hold on to your money and nothing to it. You might not have that kind of money when you really want that money in 5-10 years for next generation. So it really is a planning tool. There is never a perfect timing, but I think every day when you think that, okay, I want to get out of here, you need to start talking to your accountants, advisors, and attorneys.
Okay. To our viewers, I know I promised questions after the top of the hour, and we will get to them. I know we're a little late, but this is an important topic, and I want to just kind of wrap it up a little bit and go to Ed on the next sort of question about that is, okay, you've had this discussion, they're ready. Do you ever have to say, you may be ready, but the market really isn't. This isn't a good time to sell. And if so, how do you convey that, and what's the response, and how do you get past that point?
Yeah, it's a great question. And that's why one of the reasons we start from a personal readiness standpoint, I mentioned financial readiness,
Mhm.
is understanding two things. One is looking at a client's personal balance sheet, which oftentimes most, especially owners of family businesses, don't have time to put together. They spend a lot of time making sure their business balance sheet is put together, but not looking at their personal balance sheet and identifying, looking out and saying, okay, if we were to exit this business, we're more than likely going to lose the far majority of our income. So what income does our family need to fully accomplish all of our goals, leave whatever legacy it is that we want to do for the next generation? And once you've identified what that income need is, do we have the balance sheet to be able to support that over the rest of our lives? And oftentimes the answer might be yes or no. And what we're solving for is how much potentially do you need to sell your business for to allow you to accomplish your goals? Because one of the things, again, I mentioned that time money trade-off, is that if you are at a point where you are ready to step away and retire, and you are at a point financially that you can absolutely afford to retire, live out all of your objectives, leave whatever legacy you want to have, and maybe you're getting 10 to 20% less to your business just because of the timing or the recession environment that you're in, that's where you have to evaluate that trade-off to say, hey, I'm going to do this anyway because I want to get that time back and I want to exit now so I could go about and do these other things.
Okay.
And that's where, I stress so much that three legs of the stool because they have to be aligned, because most oftentimes mistakes are made or regrets happen when a client or a family business owner makes a decision in isolation without looking at the whole picture.
Okay.
And that's really what we start with from a planning standpoint. So the answer to your question is planning.
Okay.
Lack of a better word.
Right. And then, so Mariel, finally to you on this question of when the business is ready. Obviously, the owner's ready, the family's ready. They want to get out. How do you help them decide whether the timing is right? Either marketing from a market perspective, from a legal perspective, from a tax perspective. How do you have that conversation? What goes into that?
Well, the timing is right when you have a willing buyer,
Okay.
ready to pay an amount that you're ready to receive. So that a little bit of luck and a little bit of planning. And I think in interest of time, I think one of the things that family-owned businesses or business owners neglect to pay attention to is that that process is a longer process than they anticipate. And that a lot of deals fail for no reason, not your fault, right? So we see a lot of deals start and then just don't finish, and there are so many reasons for those
Sure.
lack of completions. I don't want to say failures, because during that process, I do see the business owners learn a lot about the exit and M&A world that they're not familiar with. And again, this is not something that business owners do on a regular basis. They're not venture capitalists. They're not
Right.
M&A lawyers. They're not in a exit event every day. So to piggyback off of what Rosalind and Ed are saying is the process leading up to a sale takes a long time. And the sooner you start, the better the timing becomes for you.
Okay. All right. All right. And Rosaline, Mariel said, the sort of basic economic question, the time is right when you have a willing buyer. Where are the willing buyers now? Are you mostly looking at private equity, as you've mentioned before? Or are you mostly looking at, are there strategic buyers out there who are capable of entering this market? Where do you find these buyers these days?
Because you usually see the valuation is much higher now. For various reasons, private equity are the first one, technically, and the sellers are not realizing what they're selling to private equity, and what the end result could be. But at the beginning, the numbers are looking very meaningful because private equities are willing to pay the amount, but not the third-party buyers who could be just
Right.
another small business owner. So we're seeing more of private equity or larger corporation than we're seeing a lot more mergers than just purely buying firms. So it's a tough market for buyers that has just solo, like you have you have a high net worth client that wants to buy a business. It's a tough market to be right now, but it's a great market for seller because the private equities are willing to pay. So it's a very different dynamics right now. In the and I was just talking to advisor yesterday, and he showed me a graph that really was an eye opener, that the valuations are not going to come down. So even in the stock market right now, it seems like everything is up, and it has to come down because it's so high up. Same thing with small businesses. According to what I'm seeing, the valuations are not going to come down. So it's hard for family businesses to kind of buy new business than private equity. For private equity, is easier.
And I imagine you pay a lot of attention to the market. Is that your experience too? It sort of makes sense, and just anecdotally from our coverage, it seems like private equity is the sort of preferred outlet here, rather than strategics, just simply because these businesses don't, basically because of what Rosaline just said, some of these are the same size businesses. They're not, and what Marielle said, they're not M&A people. They're not investment bankers. They don't really know the market. Private equity seems to be like the primary choice. Has that been your experience, or where do you come down on this question?
Yeah, and it really has a lot to do with just access to capital. Is who has the access to the cheapest capital and who could pay the highest multiple. And, a lot of PE comes in, specifically we see this in the medical field. We work with a lot of dental practice, oral surgery practices, a lot of the DSO, big corporate roll-ups. They just have almost, I don't want to say endless access to capital. But this is where we often will caution business owners, and family businesses, is oftentimes the most lucrative deal isn't the right deal.
Yeah.
Because of the trade-offs around it. So looking at a deal holistically, of saying, what legacy am I leaving this business? Because especially with family businesses, more often than not, this is a very closely held business. Again, more often than not, multi-generational, and there is a legacy aspect to it. And evaluating, private equity is, there's often a willing buyer. As soon as you put your head up or go to a trades conference or whatever it is, there's more often than not a willing buyer for it as soon as you kind of or make yourself open available for sale. But yes, private equity, to your question, is probably the leader in this because they have a lot of access to capital. But again, be mindful that the most lucrative deal is not always potentially the best deal.
Okay. And Marielle, do you have the same sort of view of the market where things are at this point?
Yeah,
And if so, I mean, and also generally, I mean, what should folks be, what kinds of legal issues are involved in sort of dealing with private equity as opposed to a different kind of buyer? I mean, where do you see that coming down? But go take it wherever way you want.
well, right now I'm seeing three types of buyers, right?
Okay.
I'm seeing the next generation or employees that are taking over the business. So sort of a interpersonal buyer. Another one is the private equity, and the other one is family offices.
Mhm.
Those are becoming more attractive to buying in a private equity manner,
Okay.
because they're familiar. You know, a lot of what Rosalind and Ed said is that family-owned businesses haven't been focused on putting their books together. And when private equity comes and views that, they think, oh, you know, this is a little bit of a mess, and we're
Mhm.
going to decrease the price because we have to fix this, and we know how to run businesses, and we're going to fix this and right the ship. Whereas family offices, they're a little bit more accustomed to that type of situation because that's how they made their money, through their own family-owned business. So those are the three types of buyers that I'm really seeing right now. When it comes to legal issues on private equity, we are seeing a lot of rollover and earnouts. And I think that business owners are a little surprised when they hear an earnout or a rollover because they wanted the cash, right? They don't want to stay in. They've grinded for their entirety of their life in developing this business, and they're saying, look, I just want out, right? So at the time that they're ready to leave, there is often this sentiment of, I'm tired. I'm tired, just give me the cash and I'm going to exit. And so that is not what you may get with a private equity buyer. So that's why some of the other options are a little bit more attractive if those other options are available.
Okay. All right. Okay. I did promise questions, and so we'll get to them right now. And I have to say that as soon as this one came in, I was really interested to hear what the response would be, and that is, how do you manage generational changes in work ethics? First of all, you can question your premise if you want. Are there generational changes in work ethics, or generational changes in ethics generally? Rosalind, you're smiling, so I'll start with you. What do you think of that question? It strikes me when I first saw this. The first thing that came into my mind was, the whole kids nowadays. They don't want to work the way we did. Nobody wants to work anymore. Is that what you're finding? How do you deal with these kinds of things?
Yeah, definitely. It's a big turning point for families and that's why we start family governance as early as when they're in college, to kind of explain to them that what's necessary as a business owner. It's not a 9 to 5 job. You own a business and you have to make a decision if you want to own a business and take the benefits of it, or you want to be a 9 to 5 person, and that's fine as well. So I think but I would say there was a last generation, I think, was more in terms of more concerned about, okay, I think it's 9 to 5 job. Now the newer kids on the block who are still in colleges, and they really want to be entrepreneur. They really want to be in businesses and grow their family. So they're kind of ready that 9 to 5 job is not where the world is going. And I think the mind is shifting again.
Mhm.
And I see that even in our own accounting firm, we had a time frame where pre-COVID, and then COVID just made it worse until then. Kids coming out of college during that time, it was like no 9 to 5 job, and just stick around, health conscious, which is great. Not saying you shouldn't do that, but it was very restricted of what you want to do with your career. Now it's shifting again. Very, very kids coming out are very dynamic. They want to be invested. They want to really work and understand that their parents have brought this business not just by staying laid back, but actually working hard. So I've started seeing this shift. And being ethical is another level people have gone. I think kids are very ethical now more than they were before. They are in terms of climate environment, climate change, and everybody's very, very conscious of what they are leaving the world. So I'm actually seeing more positive than negative. So I think I'm happy, and I'm actually very interested to see what other panelists say about that.
Yeah, I am curious too, Ed and Marielle. If you are seeing these kinds of generational differences, or are most are most families far more functional than I imagine they are, and maybe are able to handle these.
No, it's interesting. I think most of the conversations when that does come up, where we get that voice of concern from clients, my kids are in the business, they've been doing it for 3 or 4 years. They just don't have the same work ethic or do the same thing that I do. And one of the things I always ask them is have you ever asked them if they want to be you?
Okay.
If they want to take over that? And they're like, well, no, we're just all assuming it. And having those family governance conversations early on and identifying what their goals and objectives are, oftentimes maybe uncover why there's this potential of a burden of that next generation feeling that I need to take this on, but I really don't want to. And it's showing through their work ethic or whatever commitment they have to the business, or maybe the need to start a new venture or do something very different, which is extremely uncomfortable for that managing generation. But having those conversations around family governance, again, is just part of that personal readiness. Is the family aligned? Because a healthy relationship, again, family business is your family, and you're also all each other's teammates, employees, however you want to look at it. So yes, and it's having that conversation as early as possible is important to identify what they really want.
Okay. And Marielle, I mean, you've said a couple of times that, as you put it, you're a family business survivor. So, how do you see this playing out?
So whether or not there is a difference in work ethic, there's always a perceived difference. And I think this is an age-old issue. Mom and dad say, we had it harder. I mean, everyone that's come before you has always had it harder and always had worked. I mean, they walk 7 miles to school uphill in the snow every day. It's weird. So the perception is there, regardless of whether it's an actual difference. And I think that's really important because you have to deal with the issue, even if you don't think it's an issue. And what I will say is that every generation has a different way of working, and there's different technologies that are available. But if the next generation really does want the business, I have seen the next generation step up and do what is required to make sure that the business is going in a direction that they wanted to go in. And one of the hurdles that next generation or that next owner may have to deal with is a uncooperative current generation. So I mean, it's on both ends, and that's why, again, it's not just a business, it's a family. That's exactly what Ed said. And these issues are not just in silos. So it's understanding the interpersonal relationships that are incorporated into the business. That's very important.
Okay, and there was just a sort of a similar question. I'm especially interested in family dynamics and in prepping the next generation for the work and commitment required. And Ed, what I hear you saying is that, and Rosalind, I think you said the same thing, something similar, is that process has to start early in the business and in the business itself and in the planning process. Yes.
Right. Absolutely.
That's right. Yep. As early as you can. I mean, usually, you want to give them the opportunity to maybe go to college or explore what they want to do, but don't assume anything.
Right.
Don't because, have this perception. Yeah.
Because I assume the kids have sort of watched mom and dad, if that's who it was, work however long, 18 hours a day, 29 days a week. They see what the work involved is, and I imagine would sometimes want to make their own way in the world. Okay, this one. Is it advisable to have a written agreement with adult children laying out expectations from dad or mom? Marielle, I imagine the answer is going to be yes, but I'm curious as to under what circumstances should some of these things that we've been talking about be committed to writing? Is it always necessary so that everybody can see what was expected of them if they're working? I guess we're talking about people who are working in the business. It's several generations working in the business. Does it need to be sort of, do you need an org chart the way most corporations have, or how do you keep those things in perspective for everybody, and so that everybody's clear on what their roles are?
Right. So I'm going to answer the question very lawyerly.
Okay. It
Depends.
depends.
So I guess it depends on what you want in that written agreement. Is it a list of demands and expectations that the parent wants of the child, or is it a job description for this is what the expectations are of a CFO or of a COO or a CMO? I do think that there is some benefit in laying out job descriptions for employees, even if those employees are family members. And the reason is because we want to stop the bleed from business to the dinner table. And we want to try to contain those expectations to what it means to be an employee of the business rather than a son or daughter at the dinner table. And so for that reason alone, I do think it's a good idea. I also think it's a good idea to level set. Because, it's not just that you're going to give them the document and say, here's what I want you to do. They are going to have some, hopefully some input on what their job description is and how maybe they can improve that job description. So it starts a conversation about the expectations. And I think communication in any situation is key. Right. So having that open dialogue that is eventually memorialized in writing helps to air out what maybe some of the issues are underlying that request.
Okay, very good. All right, we are getting near the end, and I do want to leave some time for each of you to kind of wrap things up, but I think we have time for at least one or two more. This one is intriguing to me for not the reason I think the questioner expected. Is now a good time to sell a manufacturing business? I'll start with Rosaline because we were talking about the market. You can answer the question of is now a good time to sell a manufacturing business, but is now a good time to sell any business? Is there any kind of business that now you would say, okay, this is a good time. We know that there are willing buyers, as Mariel would have it, out there who are willing to pay the price. Are there some industries, are there some kinds of businesses that are more ready to be sold now than maybe some others?
I think that's a very broad question. And I don't know particularly if manufacturing is a good time or any particular business you can sell good time, to be very honest.
Have you seen some good deals come up in your practice recently that might sort of could be a model? Like, oh yeah, this worked out really well.
Yeah, but it's business to business. I don't think so. I can point out that because this was a manufacturing business, it had a good sale. I think it goes again, how the business was, it's a lot of dynamics within when you sell. So it can be just one item. I know I have a client who sold his food manufacturing a couple years ago, and he did amazing. But the same food manufacturer at the moment, he's also a client, he's not doing great. So for him, it was a great opportunity 2 years ago. Right now, it's not a great opportunity, not because the manufacturing industry is not doing great. The business run is not great. So it really depends upon how the business is run, where you're in the market, and what do you see in the future of the business if you think you are going to grow. So it's very hard. It's a question I don't think I have the ability to answer just a broad question in terms of sale.
Right. Then Mariel and Ed, I mean, do you have any sense for what the M&A market is for, or the private equity market is for any particular business? Is there one kind of business that may be in a better position now than another? If not, we'll move on. But I'm just curious as to what the market looks like now for some of these industries.
I think for the most part, I guess from our perspective, is it's not so much maybe industry specific, is that if you have a really well-run, profitable business, there is going to be a very willing buyer because of the access to capital, especially PE backed. We deal with a lot of private equity investments and doing due diligence for personal balance sheets, right, for clients to invest in. And one of the most common things we hear is we're almost business or industry agnostic. We are looking for just really well-run, profitable businesses. And that seems to be a general overall theme. Again, where deals get picky is that what is the business attractiveness? Would you buy your own business? If the answer is yes, and you have all your ducks in a row, odds are you're going to find a really good, attractive offer, potentially regardless of the environment.
Okay.
And any, of course, leaving out extreme circumstances, of course.
Okay. All right. I think we can do one more question because this one kind of flips one of our discussions sort of on its head. And that is, how do you prepare the next generation to create additional value with the business? We were talking about, the younger generation wanting to do something different or start new ventures. Is that the best way to build value? And if so, how do you, and Ed, you're nodding, so I'll come to you with this one first. Are there certain kinds of discussions that you need to have with people, with younger people, with children, grandchildren, about adding value to the business, about where to take the business in the future? And do folks have those kinds of discussions now?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that we do, and we actually use this in our own business, is find an operating system for family businesses of how you actually run your business. So we use EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. There's a book called Traction. If you are all business owners on this call, I would recommend that you read it. It is a very simple and easy read and a great framework for having those very conversations. Is establishing a vision for the future. Where do we want to be in 10 years? What is a 3-year picture in order to put us on track for that? What's our 1-year objective to get us to our 3-year? What are we going to do in the next 90 days to keep making sure that we're on track for that 1 year? The most important thing you to do in creating and adding value is, one, deciding on a vision, but also what it does is it creates an operating system and creating clarity for everyone on the team to start aligning and pulling in the same direction, because they might not have the intellectual knowledge or the history that the business owner had of the last 20 or 30 years. But how can they empower them and delegate that responsibility? And using EOS, for example, has done wonders for our business. We have an internal succession plan that we have built in. We're developing future leaders. So I could speak firsthand to the success of implementing something like that. But that is a really big key, is start exploring how you want to run your business, because that's going to help inform and create clarity for, and I think Mariel said it really well, having a job description for everyone, regardless of whether or not they're family. Imagine doing any type of work without knowing what your expectations are. It makes it really hard to succeed in that type of environment.
Okay, right. Unless Rosalina and Mariel have anything to add on that, we'll go to final thoughts. No. Okay, very good. Okay, so I did want to give you each a chance to wrap up, and we're going to go counterclockwise around my screen, which means we start with Rosalina.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't ready for that. No, just one thing. If you have to walk out with something, I would say make sure you have the right team in place and start planning way ahead than you think you were going to plan. Like, you have to be much more few years before any major strategy you're thinking about. I think that were the two key important I would take away from our discussion today.
Okay,
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the time and platform to be able to talk about this.
Thank you. Ed, final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I would encourage everyone on the call, take a few minutes, maybe an hour or two, go grab lunch somewhere out of the office. And, we always encourage clients to write down these 2 questions. If you didn't own your business today, would you buy it? If yes, why? If not, why? And 2, if the right opportunity, the right deal came to you tomorrow, would you, your family, and your business actually be ready to execute on it? And if the answer is no, odds are you really need to start planning. If the answer is yes, that would be awesome. And again, the most important thing you do is create alignment between your business, personal, and financial readiness. I mean, that's really the most important thing. But thank you, everyone, for listening. We appreciate, your time.
Very good. Mariel, that means you get to take us out.
So the big job. But what I will say is, again, timing and planning are really important, and planning takes a lot more time than you anticipate. And what everyone else said, having a trusted advisor is one of your most valuable assets, and outsourcing some of these decisions and outsourcing some of these analysis to your third-party advisors doesn't mean that you don't know how to run your business. It actually means that you're focused on growing that business so that you can have a successful exit or succession plan.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists. To our viewers, as always, you can read our coverage of today's event later on njbiz.com, and we'll have expanded coverage in a future print edition. This one will be dated August 3rd. Remember to look for the recording link. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.